I was welding a gate on my own ranch when 2 squad cars came tearing up my gravel driveway like I'd robbed a bank. One cop got out, hand on his holster, and shouted, "Step away from the equipment." I froze, still holding the welding torch, thinking, what in God's name is going on? Then he said it. "You've been reported by the HOA for illegal construction." I stared at him and said the words that started the whole storm. I'm not even in an HOA months earlier. I was out by my front gate, an old sagging wooden thing barely hanging on after years of Texas sun and storms. Finally replacing. It was something sturdy enough to keep out both coyotes and the kind of neighbor who doesn't know where her property line ends. I'd spent weeks welding a new gate in my shop. Heavy-duty steel with a black matte finish. Clean corners. Nothing showy. Just solid, functional, and mine. I bolted it into the existing posts, stood back, and let out a breath. That gate wasn't just metal and paint. It was a symbol. The first upgrade I'd made since retiring, a statement that this land was mine and I was here to stay. I'd owned this property since 2008, long before the subdivision popped up next door with its postage stamp lawns and paint color committees. No HOA, no city restrictions, just oak trees, open skies, and peace. That peace shattered the following. Saturday, I was out front welding a new mailbox bracket when I saw her. Pastel slacks, white sneakers, and the stiff-backed confidence of someone drunk on power. She didn't wave or ask if she could come up my drive. She just marched straight onto my land, clipboard in hand like she had a badge. "You can't put that up without architectural committee approval," she snapped, pointing at the gate like I'd offended her very soul. I calmly replied, "This land isn't part of your HOA, never has been. You can check the county plat." But she wasn't hearing it. She snapped a photo of the gate, scribbled on her form like she was writing a ticket, and muttered, "Will, be in touch. No goodbye, no thanks, no decency." I stood there, stunned, then shrugged it off, thinking she was just a bored retiree trying to feel important. But when a neon orange sticker showed up on my gate reading, "Unapproved structure, subject to removal," followed by a legal-looking letter threatening fines, I knew this wasn't over. Sheila wasn't bluffing. She was trying to pull me under the boot of an HOA I never joined. And if you've ever had someone try to muscle into your life with zero authority, then hit that subscribe button, because this fight's just getting started. A week after Sheila strutted off my land like she owned it, I walked out to check. On the barn I was framing up, just a simple pole structure to house tools and my tractor. And there it was, slapped dead center on the support beam, a blinding neon orange sticker screaming, "Unauthorized structure, subject to fine." It was crooked, like it had been slapped on in a hurry, but the message was crystal clear. I stood there for a moment, stunned, then peeled it off and tossed it in the trash. A few days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. Big words, bold threats, and a daily fine of $500 until I removed all non-compliant structures. I laughed right then and there, sitting on my porch with that envelope in hand, because my property deed was rock solid. No HOA, no covenants, no restrictions, just open-range country-zoned agricultural residential. Still, something about the tone of that letter gave me pause. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It felt like they were gearing up for a siege. I mailed back a formal response, calm and factual, including copies of my deed, a survey clearly showing my boundary. Outside their reach and the zoning code that backed me up, but then the harassment started to get dirty. First came the dog waste, stuffed right into my mailbox, wrapped in a grocery bag, left like a message. Then I started getting calls from the county zoning board about anonymous tips, alleging unpermitted development, water runoff issues, and even livestock complaints, even though I don't own a single animal besides my dog. The final straw was when I caught a man on the edge of my property line, clipboard in hand, taking photos of my fence like he was assessing it for demolition. I confronted him, asked who he was, and he mumbled something about community compliance. I called the sheriff, but they said unless he actually stepped onto my land, there was nothing they could do. That's when something in me flipped. I realized this wasn't going to stop with one letter or a calm conversation. These people weren't just mistaken. They were determined. Sheila and her crew thought they could bully me into folding. But if they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. Only I wasn't going to shout or throw punches. I was going to outthink them, out-document them, and drag their entire operation into the light. That night, after spotting that clipboard creep near my fence line again, I went full defensive. I installed 8 security cameras, motion-activated night vision, full coverage of every angle from the driveway to the barn. I wasn't just protecting my land anymore, I was building a case. I opened a file folder thicker than a church Bible. Every HOA sticker, every letter, every voicemail from anonymous, even screenshots of the zoning board inquiries. But the real win came when I paid a visit to the county assessor's office. I asked for maps, official ones, and there it was in black and white. My parcel outlined clearly, far outside the HOA boundary. Just to be sure, I pulled the original subdivision agreement from public records. Buried in legalese was a single line that lit me up inside. Lots A through Q subject to HOA governance. Parcels R through Z exempt. Mine was parcel W. They had no claim. I drafted a formal cease and desist letter, cited the relevant code, attached my deed, my survey, and the original HOA charter, and sent copies via certified mail to the board, Sheila the clipboard queen, and their law firm. A week passed. Then, too, I thought maybe I'd finally shut them down. But then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, 2 sheriff's deputies rolled up my driveway. Calm, polite, but serious. They said the HOA had filed a complaint that I was refusing lawful compliance with community regulations. The younger deputy looked green, maybe 2 years on the job. The older one stood with his hands on his belt like he'd seen it all. I didn't raise my voice. I invited them onto the porch, handed them a binder, my binder, and explained, slowly and clearly, how I wasn't under the HOA's rule. I showed them the map, the deed, the subdivision agreement. Then I pulled up the security footage showing the latest trespasser snooping around with a camera. The young cop blinked like he'd been hit with cold water. The older one rubbed the back of his neck and said, "We've been getting more of these calls lately. HOA's way over their skis on this one." That was the moment it clicked. They weren't just pushing boundaries. They were abusing the legal system, wasting police time, acting like a government. But the difference between them and real authority, I had facts. They had fantasies. And now, I had enough to make those fantasies explode in their faces. I knew I had the facts, but I needed teeth behind them. So I knocked on the door of a retired real estate attorney who lived just 3 properties down. Tom, a grizzled old Marine who'd had his own run-ins with Sheila's little regime. The moment I mentioned her name, he muttered, "That woman's been drunk on power since they gave her a budget." With Tom's help, we drafted and filed for a temporary restraining order against the HOA board citing ongoing civil harassment, documented trespass attempts, and abuse of municipal resources. We didn't stop there. We submitted the full report to the County Zoning Commission, and since the paper trail was airtight, they scheduled a public hearing. When the day came, I rolled in wearing my best boots and a clean button-up, carrying a cart with 3 thick binders, a stack of printed photos, USB drives of video evidence, and a color-coded timeline that laid every harassment, false claim, and illegal action bare for the world to see. The hearing room was packed. Neighbors, a few HOA members, even a couple of local reporters. Sheila was already there, lips pursed like she was sucking lemons, flanked by 2 of her board members and their lawyer. I didn't raise my voice once. I laid it all out like a slow, deliberate takedown. Dates, signatures, video stills of clipboard, creeps, certified letters ignored, police visits, zoning harassment. Midway through, Sheila tried to interrupt, standing up and shrieking about character attacks and how I was slandering the integrity of our community. But the zoning commissioner, an older woman with glasses and 0 patience, held up her hand and said, "Ma'am, sit down or you'll be asked to leave." Then came the part I'll never forget. The commissioner flipped through my binder, turned to Sheila and said, "Not only is this property not under your jurisdiction, it never was. And this board has made repeated false claims to law enforcement and county offices. You're lucky we're not escalating this further." You could hear the breath leave Sheila's lungs. Then the commission went further than I even hoped. They voted unanimously to issue a formal warning to the HOA, launch a full county investigation into its conduct, and lock my parcel into the zoning database as permanently exempt from all future HOA queries. In one afternoon, I went from target to shielded. And Sheila? She looked like her whole fantasy kingdom had just gone up in flames. Within 4 weeks of that zoning commission smackdown, Sheila stepped down as HOA president for personal reasons. Though we all knew the real reason was that her little empire had crumbled. The cherry on top? Their own law firm dropped them like a hot rock, citing irreconcilable conduct issues in a public notice, which I clipped and framed. But even that wasn't the end. As part of the county's sanctions, the HOA was forced to publish a formal written apology. Not once, but twice. Once in their smug little neighborhood newsletter, and once in the local newspaper, where the headline read, HOA oversteps, private citizen harassed without authority. That apology was sweet, but I wasn't letting them slink away after putting me through months of stress, false accusations, and public embarrassment. So, with Tom's help, I filed a civil lawsuit for emotional distress, legal expenses, lost labor time, and defamation. The discovery process dragged their skeletons out in the open, emails between board members referring to me as non-compliant trash, and plans to force jurisdiction through persistent presence. When their new attorney saw the pile of evidence, they folded fast. We settled out of court for $38,000. No admission of guilt, of course, but the money spoke loud enough. I used every cent of it like a final statement. I finished my barn with a steel roof and hardwood doors, installed a solar-powered front gate with automatic locking, and had a custom blackened metal plaque made, mounted proudly right beside the gate. Private property, not subject to HOA jurisdiction. Trespassers will be prosecuted. It gleams in the sun like a war medal. And every time I roll through that gate, I smile. Not just because I won, but because I never lowered myself to their level. They came after me with gossip, letters, and lies. I answered with records, law, and patience. And here's the kicker. The final twist that makes it all worth it. Now, every single time a home gets listed in that HOA community, the new buyer packet includes a freshly inserted disclosure page that reads, in bold, 112 Ranch View Road is not and has never been subject to HOA governance. That's my address, my ground, my line in the sand. They tried to make an example out of me, but I made an example out of them. Dignity doesn't mean silence. It means strategy. And when you stand firm, armed with truth, the bullies don't just back off, they vanish. If you've ever been pushed around by a power-hungry HOA or had someone try to control what you do on your own land, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories where justice wins, dignity stands tall, and the bullies get what they deserve. Because out here, we don't yell. We win with truth, grit, and a locked gate.